Agni Zotis here with the Educators Edition and Make Kids Transform. So glad that you could join us. And today we have this incredible conversation with Lady Lindy McMullin.
Start again. I'm Lady.
Our lady. And I'm really looking forward to this conversation. And so we're glad to have you to share this knowledge. Lindy, welcome so much. And I'm so glad to have you finally having this conversation. Can you please introduce yourself? Just tell us a little about you, what you do with education or whatever you think fits. But I'm very interested. I know you're multi-talented and in many places. So you can choose wherever path you want to go, but I'm very interested in your approach to education.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me, Agni, and for this wonderful opportunity. I'm going to start at the beginning, which basically took me into education. It was my mother who always said I should become a teacher because then I could travel all over the world and teach. And this was something that I was not really focused on because I wanted to become a nurse. Born in South Africa, nursing, teaching, they were professions of service, something that I have always retained within me in terms of offering my services, let's say, to the world. So I started after I had studied, I started my education with kindergarten children. So I taught in kindergarten for a period of time. And then I went to third grade in a British school. And I found that it was absolutely incredible how I could learn from my students. So I've never been the kind of teacher that, would sit in front and say, look, I know everything. No, I don't know everything. I can pass on what I am supposed to pass on to you, but then they would teach me. And they taught me about inclusiveness. They taught me about acceptance of diversity because I always ended up with children in my class who had different challenges, etc. I have to say that I did actually start working with challenged children when I was 12. From 12 to 15, I used to work in my vacation time at Woodside Sanctuary in Johannesburg, which was a clinic where children came and they stayed and that were severely handicapped, either physically or most of them had Down syndrome. So I used to be the assistant of the psychiatric nurse, hence why I wanted to become a nurse. But it was funny that one day she left me with this car. I was only 12. And she had always said to me, do not lock the door, do not leave the children. You have to keep everything up. But I was only 12. And I went into the storeroom to get some paints, and little Heidi locked me in the storeroom and stood on her head outside. And no amount of pleading for Heidi to open the door, she would not open the door. It was amazing. So I was made very much aware of the needs, let's say, of individual students. I taught art in high school. I also taught drama to children for many, many years. And we used to put on theatrical performances. And they were absolute stars because I would focus on the potential that they had inside of them. So I would be there and say, come on, you can do this better. So we put on performances like The King and I, like Fiddler on the Roof. And we actually did Shakespearean Midsummer Night's Dream in junior school. And they were unbelievable.
But you're a kid also during this, right?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Having absolute fun and enjoying it. Totally. And then I went on to carry on my studies, and I was moving into more of a psychological understanding of what children need especially children who have been traumatized, etc. So I got very much into psychology. I did my postgraduate work in transpersonal psychology and consciousness studies, which brings me to today, where I am the head of a department, a psychology department at the American University here in Athens, and I am a associate professor. So I enjoy teaching tremendously. The more managerial side of being a director of a program is not my best forte, let me put it that way. But when I get into the classroom, that is when I shine. And I've discovered something, that it is the students that actually inspire me to teach them. It's amazing, that flow of energy.
Of course.
So that is who, more or less, I am in terms of being a teacher. Been a teacher and been in education all my life, and in psychology.
How I'm kind of curious, how did you get the opportunity at 12 to be, how did they entrust you with your colleagues? Although
It was, yes,
those weren't your colleagues, but
that is an interesting, that's very interesting, that question, because I had gone, for the first time, we had traveled from South Africa to London. And we were staying at a hotel, and a group of challenged children came into the hotel. And I sat up and said to my late brother, that is who I want to work with. He turned around, looked at me in a startled way and said, are you sure? And I said, yes, that is who I need to work with. And he said, when we return to South Africa, I will arrange it. So Michael was a lawyer. He was a very well-known lawyer in South Africa. And he arranged and went and spoke to matron at Woodside Sanctuary and said that he had this incredible sister who was very sensitive and wrote poetry and painted and did all sorts of wonderfully, let's say, creative things as a young child. And that's how I got in. And then I went to every vacation time, went to Woodside Sanctuary. And then when I was 15, matron showed me the worst case. And that has stayed with me always. She was not sure if I could take it at 15, but she had seen that I was, really connecting with the children and doing whatever I had to do. And it was a little girl who had encephalitis. So you can imagine, for a 15-year-old, that was kind of like shocking to see this very extended head, almost like a non-human. And yet I touched her chest. And when I touched her chest, she smiled. There was a smile on her very deformed face. And I knew I had made contact with her inner being, with her authentic self, with what I call soul, and which psychology calls self. And that, I think, paved my way to understanding that we all have an incredible potential inside, and children are just waiting to be discovered and to be nurtured and to be held and to then grow.
it's really beautiful. Soul self.
The soul self, yes, absolutely.
Is that your approach to teaching?
It is. It is, in terms of the fact that I do look at, or let's say my forte at the moment is trauma. So actually, I just finished teaching a 5-hour class on trauma and trying to explain to would-be therapists who are just finishing their study, their master study, it's a master program, in telling them how delicate they have to be, how important the therapeutic relationship is, how to allow the trauma itself to appear rather than to dig in and to create more trauma. I think it's really, really important. And yes, I do add the soul as a bottom layer. I know that IFS and Schwartz talks about the self. I tend to believe that the self is still a part of our personality and our character, and that beneath that is the soul. So I like to quote James Hillman when he talks about revisioning psychology. And I think that in education, we should be teaching children from the very beginning of their lives in kindergarten all about psychology, all about the language of the psyche, because they are so aware, so much more aware than adults are, because they are still children. And there's a lot of fantasy and the ability to play with art and with acting and with theater and with creative play. There is so much that can plant, let's say, can what is the word that I'm looking for? There's a necessity to awaken their inner potential and to guide them and to hold the space so that they can grow into balanced human beings. So I think that the education system in general everywhere has to change. That's my belief system.
So is mine, by the way, and why I do my programming.
Yes.
How do you see that applicable in very basic ways? But how do you see that applicable for an educator, for example, that is teaching now kindergarten or first grade or third grade or elementary, like that still dreamy state of mind, which is
Well, I think that all of them have to.
stubborn
I mean, I'm a little bit strict on that in terms of the fact that I believe that every educator should have studied psychology. I find it absolutely essential, especially developmental psychology, so that they can understand whether there are developmental gaps in their students, that there shouldn't be that much on a focus on how we teach, but how the child learns.
Mm-hmm.
And finding far more alternative ways, going outside into nature, teaching, for example, about plants and the way that everything grows. It is so much better to do it in nature, to get them to plant seeds and to grow plants and to then become part of the process of growth, to go and look after animals, to go and be outside in nature, learning about nature, going to the sea, learning about what is at the bottom of the sea, going to a mountain, not geography as it was just, learning about different things, but not being in contact with it. So I think that would be something that I think would change the pace of education.
I agree, Lindsay, but also we have to take into consideration that education is within a system and guidelines, and those guidelines are very strict,
Yes.
right? Like, for example, our kids in the States here, they don't go out at all. Most of them don't even have playtime, which is absurd, so these 5-year-olds are expected to sit on a desk for 8-9 hours, which is completely against their nature. And if they're doing it, they're sick, really. There's something wrong because they don't have the energy to move around. And at that age there. And so I completely agree. But how do we solve that issue when there's an educator that understands this concept and agrees, but has to deal with the perimeters that they already deal with, right?
I think that is the problem. And that is why, to a certain extent, people get tired and they cannot really, you fit into the system. The system is there for you to fit inside it. And I would hope that this is a change that is happening in the now, where things ought to, from a moral obligation, change. See, I was in the British system. So in the British system, we had a carpet and, they would do writing. There is stuff that they have to do when they're sitting at a desk, like writing, etc. But then we would go into our little corner and I had them sitting in a circle and I would give them angel cards. And angel cards would be little cards that I had got from Scotland that would have specific values like wisdom like love, and then they would choose them and then work with them over the week. But I was pretty free in terms of doing this. Maybe I was lucky enough to leave education in terms exactly in time so that I could, move into university and not be so constricted, because I think that it's really important that we give students a voice. And if they don't have a voice, I think it is tragic. And I do not know what is going to happen, but I do believe that the top-down system has to dissolve and that we have to work as teams. And there should be a constant awareness that we are responsible as a group of elders, let's say. I don't know who actually decides on the system of education. Are these educators themselves, or are they not? Who is in charge of deciding how we learn, what is important?
I don't know, but I don't think it's very relevant to the real life. So it's, I don't agree with the system. So I don't even contemplate that idea.
Yes.
It's just like, how do we reach those kids when we know, right, that the system, and it's overwhelming because a lot of the educators that I know really burn out because their deans, their principals, are dealing with like test scores. I'm like, test scores? The one, first grade? Like, who cares?
Exactly.
Listen, I had that conversation with my son. My son, when he was in kindergarten, was like, Mom, I got to do homework. And I was like, I'm not doing homework. I'm anti-homework, as a matter of fact, and I really hate homework. And not only that, if you never do homework, I'll be fine with it. Like, I don't care. And he was like, but Mom, I like my star. And I said, well, then you do your homework.
Exactly.
Your mama isn't doing. And he did his homework. I never, ever, ever had to rehab that conversation, but it was a conversation that I had from the beginning. That I was like, because I also know parents that are sitting there doing 1 + 1 = 2. I'm like, are you crazy? Like, where's the value to that, right? Because everybody gets into these systems, right? It's like, no, my kid has to have 100 stars. It's like, what are you talking about? Like, let her.
Look, I think that there has to be a happy balance, let me put it that way, between what they do at school. I've seen young children really feeling proud of their letters, of their drawings.
Yes.
They need to have that playtime and not be in so much of a schedule, because this is what is creating internal pressure. That's why I continuously say that, teachers should, or at least those that are in charge of deciding what kind of system, they should have studied psychology as well. Because without psychology, how can you possibly decide on what a system should have in place? You need to understand that the psyche has its own language. We try to put things into a scientific way, but being a scientist is completely different to being a therapist. Being a scientist is completely different to being an educator. I would like the idea of, let's say, presenting to young children all these fantastic names of people who have moved on, who have made a difference in the world, and give this to them to learn about their lives and how they experienced certain things. So this is where, for example, at university, obviously up to now, quantitative research has been number one. Well, I think that qualitative research, it's time for qualitative research to emerge. This is extremely important. How do you experience? Do we ask children how they experience school? Do we listen to them in terms of how they envision the future, learning how to read, how to write? Because that is very important. So, the idea of flashcards and a fun time, learning history by getting dressed up into all sorts of different costumes and enacting the historic events. They will remember them.
Right.
And they are part then of looking at history. So I really think that these systems have to change.
Instead
I
of
would
horizon. Right.
absolutely, and I would hope that this change will come. I think that the old system is holding on really tightly right now. I think that there is a lot of movement in terms of trying to change things, but they are holding on real tight because at every paradigm shift, there is this aspect of, no, I'm keeping the old order. And then the old order has to collapse and something new has to come through because that is the whole cycle of life.
Do you see that happening in the universities?
I would hope so, although I see the opposite happening in jobs. So that is exactly. But I'm thinking that, just before a change, usually you do go into a worse situation where everything is really tight. And then there are so many people out there on the streets. There are so many young people that are actually talking and they have an incredible wisdom. I mean, I know that they are facing, nothing is ever perfect. But if we are a little bit aware of the fact that we need to all work as a team, that this whole idea of global education, as far as I'm concerned, is the only answer, is to actually think about also people learning about other people's cultures, not being afraid of other people's cultures. If we are to move towards an evolution, this is what we have to embrace. So I'm very passionate about that. And I don't think that I would be able to work in a system where I was just asked to stick to the syllabus and teach them what let's say, older people and years ago, how it has evolved. Because history is changing, the world is changing. So surely education has to change as well for the better.
The world's changing rapidly and it's happening in every aspect. We're seeing that, right?
So that's the good part in terms of, okay, fine, this is the old system. We have to be understanding of the old system and then, sort of like look at all the different possibilities and how we can deal with it so that there isn't all of this burden out. And of course, technology now coming in with AI and stuff like that, it's complicating things.
Extremely.
I mean, I really have said to the students in psychology that they will get an F if they use AI because I asked them to reflect and reflect.
Critical thinking. Oh my God.
Absolutely. And it's like, please, if you're going to use AI, you're going to get a 0 because for me, it's the same. First of all, it's double the work. They have to really check that the AI information that they've got is actually correct. And that is a mammoth amount of work. So they may as well go into their own research. And how are they going to learn if they're just getting everything done and produce us? Exactly.
But not, and that's the biggest challenge, I think, even now. I mean, we were going about stopping critical thinking anyways for a couple of decades. And now we're seeing that on another level.
I mean,
plus the AI is very bland.
Well, exactly. And it doesn't cease to be a machine. It is not a human being. And there isn't an aspect of consciousness yet. I have no idea if that is, going to change, that it can be quite dangerous. But in general, I just don't like the idea of all of this idea of, people who are alone, getting an AI companion, a robotic companion. I remember when I was at university in the United Kingdom, we had an excellent professor who was telling us about kindergarten teachers and that in Japan there was a kindergarten teacher who had a specific smell, who was trying to tell children that, she loved them and stuff like that. So from a practical point of view, yes, it's wonderful. The robot teacher will have all the answers for all the questions. But is that really where we want to move towards? What about empathy? What about compassion? What about gratitude? What about that human connection? Now, when I was finishing actually at school, I remember that in Britain they had brought about the aspect that, you had to be very careful. You couldn't touch children, you couldn't wipe their noses, and all of that. So I think that we're going from one extreme into another in a bipolar world, and that is it's necessary in a way for change to happen so that we can get to the midpoint and use both aspects to learn from and to choose that midline, the Tao.
What do you teach your kids? What subjects? I'm kind of curious, like your approach.
When I was at school or when I was teaching at school?
No,
Or
no.
at university?
No,
Now.
no.
I teach a number of things. I've taught brain and behavior, neuropsychology, psychotraumatology, counseling, the first counseling, let's say, interviewing, which I know that, of course, I'm in a program with cognitive behavioral psychotherapy and cognitive behavioral therapy, which is CBT, which is going around everywhere. And I understand that the system cannot spend the time with people. So it is a good evidence-based therapy, but it is not applicable to everyone because everyone is unique, number one. Number two, what about people who have suffered from trauma and who have deeper issues? You can't just change the thought processes. This is this idea of, pop psychology with here is an affirmation, repeat it to yourself over and over again, and then you'll be fine. Well, no, it's not like that because with triggers, that wound is still within. So that has to be completely dealt with. So from, let's say, diagnosis, what I always teach the students is, first of all, there's psychologists that can't diagnose, only psychiatrists can diagnose. So I'm very clear about that. Secondly, I tell them, if you are listening to your client, and diagnosis is foremost in your mind, you are going to hear what you want to hear in order to fit those boxes, to tick those boxes in the diagnosis, and to find a technique to help your client. The point is that you need to listen deeply to their story, because I think that this is what we need to become aware of in general, is the silent voice that is internal and doesn't feel that it is understood, cannot make itself known, is not seen. And maybe this is why we have this, let's say, resurgent of voices that are coming out to speak, and it's gone to the other extreme again. So this historic aspect of we keep moving into extreme situations, either it's completely to the right side of a spectrum or it is to the left. But what we don't seem to understand is that the spectrum has many different places, and that somewhere along the line, balance can only be found by listening to what children have to say, what adolescents have to say, because it's all part and parcel of the developmental spectrum that they're going through in life. What somebody who has lived their life has to say, things about life and death and rebirth. There are so many things that we don't talk about and that remain hidden. And then we wonder why mental health is a problem and that people are losing, let's say, an aspect of well-being.
A big one.
Totally. And within that, I think, education, psychoeducation, we need to educate people. We need to educate people who are unaware. Who have
but listen, I find a lot of therapists unaware.
Oh, absolutely.
Right?
Because they don't have their experience. Yes, I agree with you fully.
Because they don't do it themselves, right? It's like this idea. You can have all the knowledge. Wisdom is different.
Exactly.
Wisdom is embodied, right? I could read all the books. I could have PhDs coming out of my galzu, but it's like without the experience, you cannot have the wisdom. You're not embodying it, right?
Absolutely. And I think I found
and I think they cause a lot of they cause a lot of issues, by the way, even worse. Anyway, sorry to interrupt.
No, they do. Absolutely. I agree with you fully. And I think that this is where I mentioned IFS and Schwartz. But what I have developed in my research is what I call internal archetypal systems therapy, which is using the wisdom of myth. So again, I will mention James Hillman and Jung and Karenyi, who all
Campbell came.
Absolutely. Joseph Campbell's hero's journey is absolutely brilliant in terms of the stages that we go through. I would just say, absolutely. It's kind of like a spiral. So there is so much wealth. And I'm very glad in a way that I did move to Greece at the age of 18 and that I became very conscious of living within these ancient, let's say, buildings and the land, and learned about the trauma, let's say, that each land carries. But the myths themselves, I think that they can offer that wisdom. So there is so much to teach children if we rewrite those myths with their proper wisdom teaching behind it. I did my PhD in ancient Greek myth and music in personal, professional, and transpersonal development. It was a mammoth task, but I did it with the myth of Persephone and Demeter. I can tell you that continuously stuff emerges that I haven't seen before. It's like when you do a qualitative study. You start looking at the ground, then you go a little bit deeper, then you go a little bit deeper. Then you realize that this is multi-layered, that you will always find something there about the growth, about how the evolution, let's say, of life occurs. So I think that it's fascinating. At the moment, I'm very much into the myth of Psyche and Eros in terms of the shame and guilt and love and psyche and messages that are all hidden within these myth stories. And that's where the archetypes came from. So that's why I'm very much into the idea of looking at our archetypes, talking about dominance and submissiveness, those two aspects that we all carry, the trauma that we carry as human beings.
So interesting. This is a massive conversation, but I love, can you elaborate, please?
Elaborate on what? What exactly? On that. Okay, let me put it this way. I mean,
I even like the idea of how you went from the myth into the dominant and submissive self, and I completely understand, or I find it fascinating. So,
well, this is buried in our history. It also is the way that our brain functions. It's just a brain stem. So, when we talk about the fact that the brain is wired in such a way that we carry on our species, that we carry on our genes, that we carry on, in survival. But there's always in history a dominant and a submissive person. And until we go back to the layer of primal energy that we have, which is based on our instincts without the wisdom that comes in, we have to acknowledge that this is what we have and work with it. I call it working the grain. So if you're working the grain, the grain is going through so many different processes before you get that beautiful loaf of bread. And so working the grain, this is where I draw on Demeter as being the goddess of fertility and the earth goddess and the grain that was so important at that point in time. So if you're working the grain, it has to go through all these alchemical processes. And this is, all of us have to go through alchemical processes, whether we're carrying transgenerational wounds, whether we believe in past lives. It doesn't really matter. The fact is that there are some things that are just mysterious about our being on this planet. So we definitely must have a greater purpose. And this is where I draw on positive psychology, let's say, Seligman, who says that you need to believe in something that is higher, beyond us. We tend to think that we're the center of the universe. There's only us, and we are tiny. We're like a grain of sand in an enormous space. If we just understand that and become a little bit more humble, I think that would embrace a more global aspect of who we are and who we're trying to become, because that is another question. In terms of, yes, technology moves very much forward, but what are we doing as human beings? We are still killing each other. We are still having wars. We are still saying, this is my land, that is your land. No, this is mine, this is yours. And that actually brings a lot of frustration, because this has been going on for so long from the very beginning, and the land is ours. It belongs to planet Earth. It is not mine or yours. And if this community living or communal living can keep its balance without having a leader taking over and then different aspects coming out, I think it's part and parcel of the cycles that we go through. This is where Campbell's, let's say, journey for me is a spiral. We are continuously being called. We are continuously being asked to refine our inner world. I think that Mahatma Gandhi said that we have to become the change that we wish to see in the world. If we don't start off with ourselves, we can't move forward. And I have him as a, mentor, as Nelson Mandela. Nelson Mandela, after 20 years of being in jail, comes out and then has this incredible reconciliation that people have where they actually dialogue. I mean, the work that he did in South Africa, I know that there are still major issues. Change is not going to happen overnight. But if we start at home, and when I say at home, it means within ourselves, within our family units, if we become aware of what is the need of our children, parents, for example, who are very busy, I understand this. Mothers working, fathers working, on their mobile telephones, go and play, take this, play on the computer.
Right.
And in a way, all we're telling them is to be silent and get on with your stuff because I'm busy. So if we all become aware of this, I think things have changed in general. I see far more fathers becoming part of the family unit, playing with their children, and that is excellent because it's also, the different generations. In the past, fathers did nothing. They went out to work, came home, took up the newspaper, one waited for their food to be cooked, and it was mostly the woman that was raising the children. Now, at least there are two parents, because that's what we need. We all need two parents, and we need loving relationships and stable relationships in the home environment in order to be able to trust and to move forward.
Yeah, but there's no evidence of that, as divorce rates are more. So that's not going to happen. I'm not convinced of that, but I do agree.
It's happening maybe at a slower rate, or that's what I see. It also, depends on what you see. You look for what you want to see, and that makes you happy. So I have seen a number of fathers, and it has made, well, this is in Greece at least, it has made an impression on me. Even watching people who come as tourists and stuff like that, how the children are, how they behave. In Greece, children are a little bit more free. Let me put it that way. Freedom
Of course
is an
it
aspect.
is. And it's
So
a culture that is family orientated.
Absolutely.
It really is. I mean, even if dads don't sit there, you have the family system, you have meals, you have the taverna, you have grandmothers, young kids, they're dancing in the platea. It's not segregated.
No.
Where, I mean, Greece is it's a good place to be, that's for sure. I mean, it has its challenges, right?
Absolutely. Everything has. Every one of us have the challenges. And
yeah, but it has community, and this I see very vividly from when I even go there. Like there's community, and it's accessible. It's not like something a big deal, and you're sitting in a taverna, and all of a sudden everybody's dancing out of nowhere.
yes. No, there is that zest for life. That zest for life and the idea that, oh, we'll do that tomorrow. Let's not faff around about it. Let's have fun. So the children are out in the streets and playing more and playing, and play is a very important aspect.
Please tell us why, because I know parents that just want their kids working to study. And I'm like, what are you doing?
There has to be a happy balance, as I say. Let them study, let them find what they want to do. Don't let us as adults suggest what they should do. Who knows what I would have done if I had become actually a nurse? That's a good question. I might have I might have moved on into becoming a doctor and going to places in Africa and looking after, groups of people that need something. I don't know. But I think that in general, we need to have a happy balance between learning how to read, write, and also to instill. I think that one of the most important things is that a teacher has to be passionate about learning, because it is the passion that the teacher has. If you tell me that they are, burnt out and exhausted, it's impossible. It's like it defeats the purpose. We need to be passionate to go in, to be really on a high, teaching and talking and saying, let's go outside and let's do this and let's explore that, and having that excitement. I think that that is so important, rather than, just focus on studying and doing maths and learning. We need to change the way that we learn about our history as well, to embrace different cultures. It has to become a multiversal education system.
Lindy, as I'm hearing you talk about teachers and parents, and you mentioned before guilt and shame on a different context, but somehow in my brain it's all tying in, right?
Mm-hmm.
How even parents like want to push their kids so much, or the teachers, and that perhaps is connected to guilt and shame.
Of course it is. And it's because what they didn't have as an opportunity, they tend to push their kids because they didn't have the opportunity. So if they did actually the inner work, what has always surprised me, we have to study and get a degree to do everything except become a parent. And none of us know how to be good parents, because unless we have been reared by healthy situations, which is very rare, as you say, there are divorces, etc. There is so much of a complexity that pushes us to the edge. So how come, we don't have, let's say, training programs, basic psychology, learning what is important? This should be part of the education system, so that we are creating, when children finish school, that they have a complete education, a holistic education that incorporates everything: how to eat, how to look after their bodies, how not to take their bodies casually and not pay attention to it, how to be more sacred. Because I think that that is what the word that has been missing from the whole thing, is that we have to understand that we are beings and we need to come into more sacred relationships with others and with what we do on a daily basis, and with the whole idea of educating
Yeah, because it also, what it creates is a gratitude for being alive instead of feeling a burden for being alive, right?
Absolutely.
I mean,
Absolutely.
Make Kids is all about that, because I agree with this principle and have for a couple of decades, and that's why I'm in that. But yeah, and I've seen the struggle within myself, so it's important, right? Because when we understand, like, wow, this is my vehicle to experience this vast scope of emotions and experiences, and quite infinite, by the way, because you could choose at any point to go at a different turn. Um, but when we have that sacred, it really honors life.
Of course. And in that,
But that's missing, right? That's missing.
absolutely.
That's
But
what.
even that's, it is, because if we go with the sacred aspect, then each of us have a purpose on this planet. And I do believe actually that each of us have a purpose.
Do
So,
you?
oh, I do. I believe that nothing is at all by chance on the planet, and that we are given a certain amount of free will. Yes, we are mopping up the past, transgenerational trauma, and all of that, doing a major healing. Healing has to happen on the land, healing has to happen within cultures, healing has to happen individually and collectively. From then and onwards, I do believe that each of us have a purpose. And if we understand that what we're offering is for the benefit of all and not only of the self, that it is more in tune with the collective, that way we will shift. And in that shift, create a more harmonious existence.
Yeah. Yeah, because we feel more harmonized. So it goes back to starting with the self, right?
Yes.
And we all know that, right? Because when we're harmonious, when we feel good, everything is fine. It's like whatever. When people come and cross our path and they're dumping stuff on us, it's like, yeah, whatever.
Yeah. And we also understand, I think that there is more compassion that way
Yes,
for the wounds that others have.
yes, yes. I think compassion is fundamental.
Absolutely. And this is where I think that there are dangerous aspects of the soul system as it is dying. It is bringing up a lot of fear. Like, you switch on the news and everything is fear based. And so so is a monster. And so is this, and so is that. We don't look at the fact that all these aspects that are emerging have to do with internal trauma. As Gabor Mate says, the myth of normal. What is normal?
I don't know. I've never seen it. When I do see it, it kind of scares me because I feel like it's a mask. There's no reality to it. There's no individuality, right? Because nature really favors uniqueness.
Absolutely. And authenticity.
Well, yeah.
Or being authentic and not having to wear that mask and being safe enough to be authentic.
To know what's under the mask, right? Because I
Yes.
also see when the mask is on, um, and we don't have to go far because I think at some stages we all are there within ourselves, right? Where we don't even we have a mask on. We think it's reality. And then it's like peeling the onion, there's another layer.
Everything is multi-layered in
Right.
terms of this. Everything is multi-layered, and yet who has taught us that? It's only
Nobody.
exactly.
Nobody. And if anything, they teach you like there's a machine and they're all the same and you got to treat them all the same. And that's that.
Little boxes on the hillside.
Controlled.
Absolutely.
To control and contain,
Yes.
which is causing all the neurosis in the world.
Of course. So hopefully that will shift. We have to keep hope alive.
I think it's pushing so far that I don't think it's like either go over the hill or.
Well, Pandora's box, I think, gives me strength there because, all all the, let's say, negative elements flew out, and then there was hope. And hope was at the bottom of that mysterious box.
Hope.
So hope, yes, hope. I have written a number of children's stories that I've never published, actually, that have to do with this little creature called Hope. She wasn't a creature. She was kind of like an angelic being that sat on a cloud, looked down at Earth, and just decided that she was going to, help and assist certain aspects. So it was teaching history through hope.
What do you think hope is?
A belief, a deeper belief in the meaning behind all of this that we call life and existence, and that there is a higher plan, and that we are just ready to climb Jacob's ladder and discover wonderful magic in everyday life and in connectedness with people and in the ability to love deeper and wider and to bring the sacred into every aspect of our life. And not be so concerned with, gathering objects around us in terms of self-worth. Because I think that, when you strip somebody of all the wealth that they have achieved and all the job titles that we have, what is left? Something beautiful has to be left. And that to me is hope.
Beautiful.
That magical golden flower within that we suddenly discover. And we become semi-divine. Back to myth again. See how I like to bring it all around.
Well, it is all around because it's circular and it always moves like that. It's not linear. I mean, we're trained to think, if anything, that's what's wrong with education. It's like this linear line, right? And we know that learning doesn't happen like that.
Exactly.
It's loops of I don't even want to say the word time, but there's another way to that fragment of density, right?
It's cycles.
The
Cycles of existence.
And there can't
Cycles of being. Cycles of existence. Cycles of understanding. We're all going through these cycles. And if we can actually look at things in that way, life becomes really exciting and magical.
Yeah. And I think the sacred part, right? Because I know even for myself, when I could inject the gratitude, the feeling of, wow, this is a gift, rather than, oh, another day. It's like it changes my whole attitude for the day.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And how I see it and how I see people, right? And how I see my friendships and connections, and there's so much more value and blossoming of life itself, the fractaling of life.
Well, I think you caught the key word, values. I think that we're losing slowly our values and we need to rediscover them. Everything has to be rediscovery, rebirth, regeneration, renewal, remembership.
It's a practice. It's a daily practice, honestly, if not a momentary. I think that's like the free will. I mean, you talked briefly about that, and I think that free will is that choice. That's it, like that little choice of like, what am I seeing the world as horrendous as it all tells me that it should be, the news, for example, right?
Yes, exactly.
And we are, I mean, we're in a space that we're like, is this, the end? Because that's what I see. Like when it's like these conversations that come through, it's like, it's the end, it's the end. I'm like, the end of what?
It's not the end, it's the beginning. And in each ending, there is a beginning. So we have to look at the beginning and what we are evolving into and how we are moving into something that is more expressive, more sacred, that to me is really exciting.
Me too.
That we can move beyond our traumas, that we can move beyond the wounding, and that we can heal.
Of course. We're resilient.
Exactly.
We're really resilient.
We are. And we've been given all the tools. I think that that is the fact of the field of potential, that we have a field of probability, a field of possibility, and a field of potential. So the field of probability is that based on my past, based on my transgenerational wounding, there's a probability that there's going to be a certain amount of determined action in my life. There is the field of possibility that as long as I work with that, I'm opening myself to a lot of possibilities. And then I jump into the field of potential. And within the field of potential, the sky's the limit and even further. So I need to embrace all of that.
There is no sky. I love it. I love it. Anything else?
Not really.
There's so much to
There is, absolutely. But I think for a start, it's great that you're doing the work that you're doing, and it's inspiring. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to reminisce about, I think that these kind of discussions are really inspiring, because when we're put on the spot and we're asked to introduce ourselves, to think back, we see a different aspect. There's a different facet that emerges, that begins to shine. And that is a feeling, it's not a feeling of, oh, look at what I've accomplished, or, oh, I'm successful. Not at all. It's a matter of like a childlike
It is a child
that emerges at that moment. And then it's like, okay, let me get, going. I can grow a little garden and plant different things in, and then watch how they're going to grow. And, look out at a different world and see a different world, and greet a soul in a person rather than their character or their personality, and connect at a soul level in authenticity. And that makes life rich.
Beautiful. I think that's...
Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity, Agni.
Thank you, sweetheart. Very
Having grown it tremendously.
Me too.